9, correct? And if you're at all interested, I know we have some youth that are going to be going, but if you are at all interested in making some faces smile this morning, we would love to have you be a part of what is going on. If you want to just touch base with him. Mike, if you want to stand up, do a little plie or something, a grand plie, just so people get an idea of who you are. He will be able to answer any of your questions about that and get you connected with what's going on. And then next week, we actually have our Polar Express event. I'm sorry, next week, tomorrow. Tomorrow night this is Polar Express Eve, is our Polar Express. And you may have known, as we've been kind of announcing it, that there's a lot of excitement and attention. And so we had to do tickets for the event. And as of earlier this week, all the tickets are gone. So the tickets, it's a free event. They're free tickets. So sold out is kind of a silly term, but they're sold out, right? So we're expecting a packed house here tomorrow night. And we're going to have lots of fun. We're going to have a conductor here taking pictures with kids. We're going to have a Santa Claus here taking pictures with kids. And there's going to be cookies. And every seat around here is going to be packed and full. So if you're able to help us kind of maintain some order of, knowing what we're doing, that kind of thing, if you would like to join us tomorrow and be a part of that, you can touch base with Katrina Skinner. I know she's kind of got a list of all the different areas we could use volunteers. And we would love to have you help us out with that. The more people, the merrier. And our way of saying thanks is we're going to let you wear a fun little Christmas hat for being one of those. So that alone should probably be enough to get you to come out and be a part of our evening. And then Christmas Eve, working up to Christmas Day. But Christmas Eve is on a Sunday. So next week, a week from today, just to kind of give you an idea of our Christmas Eve plans, we're going to have our normal gathering time here in the morning at 10 o'clock. Only it might look a little different. We might not be in here. We might be someplace else, and it might not be your traditional, what you see every week. But we would encourage you to join us for that. And then Sunday evening, we're going to have a Christmas Eve service. And this is what we would definitely encourage you to invite anybody that you know who doesn't have any kind of church family or people that they do life with. If you have any friends, neighbors, coworkers, this might be one of those few times that they would find themselves going with people that they know to a church service, right? So next Sunday, Christmas Eve at 7 o'clock is going to be the Forward Point Community Christmas candlelight service. So we encourage you to take some business cards and invite people to join us and be a part of what's going on there, okay? And then last but not least, if you came this morning looking to give, there's a couple different ways that you can give here this morning. We have our joy box in the back there because it's a joy to give. And one of the ways we give is with our finances. You can put it in the joy box in the back there as you enter or exit, as well as you can give online at our website, forwardpoint.org. You can give right through the website. Or on your phones, you can give just by texting any amount to the short code. I know it's not up there. Anybody know the short code by memory? Test. 84321. The most important numbers in the entire morning. No, I'm just kidding. But if you'd like to give through your phone, you can do that by texting a short code to 84321 and get that squared away. Okay? So this morning we're going to continue on with worshiping Jesus through music. So if you want to stand to your feet, we may be having some kind of technical difficulties. So we might not have a video to play for some high fives, but if you would, we're going to go around and we're going to do some low fives this morning, all right? So find 5 people, and we're looking for, we got the music anyways, and we're looking for low fives this morning.
Will you be able to hear it then?
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start off real simple here. Angels we have heard on high. Angels, here we go. Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er and the mountains in reply, echoing their joy. Gloria, glory. Come to Bethlehem and see Him whose birth the angels sing. Come adore on bended knee Christ the Lord, the newborn King. Gloria in excelsis Deo, in Gloria in excelsis Deo. King of heaven. Just sing it again. King of heaven. King of heaven come. King of heaven come. Sing it again. King of heaven. King of heaven come. King of heaven come. King of heaven. King of heaven come. King of heaven come. King of heaven come down. King of heaven come down. King of heaven come. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven come. King of heaven rise up. King of heaven rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven come. Jesus, let your kingdom. Here we go. Jesus, let your kingdom come here. Let your will be done here. In us, Jesus, there is no one greater. You alone are Savior. Show the world your love. King of heaven come down. King of heaven come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven come. King of heaven rise up. You stand against us. You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven come. We are children. Here we go. And we are children of your mercy. Rescue for your glory. And we cry, Jesus, set our hearts towards you. That every eye would see you. Lifted high, King of heaven come down. King of heaven come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven come. King of heaven rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven come. Let's sing it again. King of heaven. King of heaven come down. King of heaven come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven come. King of heaven rise up. And who can stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven come. Let's sing King of heaven.
adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord.
You know the song, Good, Good Father. We just come here today to worship him. Sing with me. I've heard. And I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like. But I've heard the tender whispers of love in the dead of night. And you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. I've seen, and I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know where I'm searching for answers. Only you provide, because you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, yeah, you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Sing with me. You are perfect. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Sing it again. You are perfect. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us.
us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Lord, for you alone are worthy, for you alone are worthy, for you alone are worthy. Christ the
I will give you all the glory. Give him a shout of praise, church. He's worthy. He will give you all the glory, Lord. Jesus, we will adore you, Lord. Amen.
Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge.
Last month, my wife and I, along with our oldest daughter, got to go see The Lion King on Broadway here in Syracuse. I don't know, did anybody else get a chance to go see that while I was here in town? It has a pretty cool show, has some pretty significant meaning with the Doyle family. It was back in June, some years ago, when I proposed to Chazlet. The Lion King was part of that production that the guy has to put on in order to be able to, propose to this spouse, right? Hopefully, soon-to-be bride, fiance, that type of thing. There's a lot of pouring out that goes into for a guy to be able to work up the courage, right? The nerve to be able to do the whole get down on one knee. That alone is scary. And then if there's people around, you got to do it in front of people. And then if there is, you believe in asking the Father for permission, you got to go through that route. And there's just all these other things that go into it. And last night, as I was thinking about this, I did a Google search for some proposal fails, and there's some guys who poured themselves out in these big, dramatic ways, only to have the young lady say no or turn around, and they're kind of left hanging there with their not knowing what to do or what's going to happen or what is a result of everybody looking on how they're going to handle it. So this morning, I thought I'd share with you a little bit about what it was like for me to that day to propose. Obviously, I also asked for my father-in-law's permission to be able to propose to Chazlet. And when I called and asked him, I was first pacing in the living room, a series of times before I worked up the nerve to finally make the call. And once I did, I kind of spit it out in the best way that I could, being as nervous as I was. And as it began to come out, I finally asked him, and he said congratulations, and said of course. But then I was like, okay, now I haven't asked her yet, so I need you to, keep this between us, don't say anything. And then, I click hang up, and then like a half an hour later, I get a call from my wife saying, the weirdest thing just happened. My dad just called me and said, congratulations. And I was like, oh, facepalm, right? And I guess he did somewhat of a good job to try to cover up for it by saying, congratulations about something else. But it kind of, I think, put a bug in my wife's ear that something might be going down, right? So I started putting the pieces together for this event that would take place. I got these VIP tickets for Lion King that was going to be in Tampa, about an hour north, so we could see the Lion King on Broadway. And then as that's going on, I'm looking through, some other things. She really likes P.F. Chang's, so I make sure, okay, we're going to stop at P.F. Chang's so it can be part of the dinner as on our way up there. And afterwards, we're going to go, and I'm going to do it at Denny's, right? I know you think, what's Denny's? There's probably nobody ever done it before at Denny's, and nobody's done it since at Denny's. But Denny's kind of holds a special place in our hearts. Denny's was the first place where we sat down and just talked about, starting this relationship, and that's why it was sentimental for me. So while we were going to be out, I had my friend go into Denny's and ask their permission ahead of time. We kind of roped off a section of Denny's, and it turns out they didn't really need the seating anyways, but we roped off this section of Denny's and decorated with the rose petals and the flowers and candles. And as we're coming back into town after seeing Lion King, we're hungry, so let's go to Denny's and eat. And we walk in, and she sees it, and she's swooned, that this is happening there. And the waitresses are all giggly, right, because they've never seen anything like this before at Denny's. So they're excited to be a part of it, and we're eating, and I have them bring out the same meal that we had in that first date, if you were. We had some cheese fries and some hot chocolate, right? So that comes out, and did the whole get on one knee, and I asked her to marry me, and with the roar of the crowd there at Denny's behind me, she said yes, and the rest is history, right? Yay! Woohoo! Go. Yeah, we're 8 years here. We just celebrated the birth of our oldest daughter last week. She turned 7, right? So 7 years, and you think about just the things that come a part of a beautiful relationship and the story as it continues to write. And I don't know if Justice knows how lucky she is. 7 years is the longest I've kept anything alive to date. So she is in a good place, and that's some of our engagement photos that we had. You may or may not recognize either one of those people. So we're in the middle of this series, Come to Worship, and we've talked about kind of some of these different ways that we worship. The first week we talked about lifting our hands, right, as kind of this symbolic expression of things that are going on inside of us, a reaction to what God is doing in our hearts. And last week Steve talked about giving of our gifts, right, this idea we can physically, tangibly give things, money, resources, finances. It's an act of worship. Next week, we're going to be kind of talking about this idea of bowing on our knees, right, being on our knees in worship. But today we're going to talk about this idea of pouring out our hearts. And the hard part about this idea of worship is it's a little bit more abstract than the other weeks, right? The other weeks are very cut and dry. There's raising your hands, there's getting on your knees, or there's giving things, right? There's physical, tangible, obvious things. But today it's a little more abstract, a little bit more, we got to kind of think, and it's going to maybe look different for you than it does for me. But there's a part of all of us inside that connects with God in a way that, you can only experience apart from anyone else. As a result of the way that you lay bare and pour out the deep feelings, the deep things that are going on in your spirit and in your soul and in your hearts that you're feeling. It's on an intimate level. And I can't tell you what or how it's going to look for you, because it may look totally different for you than it does for me, right? How it may look for you at one point may even be different than how it's going to look later on in life. It's always going to be changing, and it's going to be different based on the season of life that you're in. But there's the way this morning that we're going to talk about how we can pour our hearts in worship to God. And if we can begin to tap into this intimacy and make it a part of our lives and a part of our relationship with Him, then I believe that there's going to be, a lot of freedom we're going to find, a lot of connection, a lot of reality where the relationship becomes more of an intimate relationship and less of maybe an abstract, distant relationship. So how do we pour our hearts out as an act of worship? Right, whether you may be on the top of a mountain right now in life where everything is great, you couldn't ask for anything better. The world is your oyster, and you can't do anything wrong, and everything is going your way. Or it may be that you're in the deep, deep valley of life right now, and it doesn't seem like anything can go your way. No matter what you do, no matter the decision that you make is honest and as pure as your motives may be, just things seem to kind of constantly bring you back to a place of heartbreak and hurt. And whether the top of the valley, the deep top of the mountain, or deep in the valley, we can learn and make this a part of our lifestyle to pour out our hearts to God in worship. But the reality is, for those of us who may find ourselves in that valley, there's an opportunity for us to experience a depth and an intimacy as we pour out our hearts and allow the pain and we allow the suffering and the loneliness to be exposed and then to be healed. And there's no time like the holidays where these kind of pains and feelings are magnified. Right? Things that maybe we've kept hidden for the rest of the year seem to kind of come out and ooze and find their way to affecting our daily lives. Maybe there isn't going to be someone there this year that's been there every year before. Or maybe you got a bad medical report this year and it's kind of weighing over you, or there's something different about your body and you're not sure what's going on, and it's kind of bringing some fear as to what it possibly could be, and you're not sure, do I make the call to the doctor? So if you're in the middle of a deep, deep valley, then you're going to have an opportunity to start pouring your heart out to God as an act of worship here this morning, because God cares for the brokenhearted. He is near to those who need him. And if we can pour out and be open and honest and real with our need and desperation for him, then I believe this morning we're going to meet and be able to relate and experience God in a new way. And if there's one person in the Bible who kind of is no stranger to going through deep, deep valleys and being able to pour out his heart in worship, it was David. And David was in one of those deep valleys when he had this to say. He said in Psalm 142, he says, I pour out before him my complaint. All right, if you're following along in the YouVersion app or taking notes there, David says, I pour out before him. Right, this is where we get this idea of pouring out our heart in worship. Here is David in the midst of his troubles, in the midst of his pain, in the midst of his questions. He says, I pour out before him my complaint. A lot of times it's easy to hear that, and sometimes people would say, oh man, you can't do that to God, right? You got to be respectful, you got to be, and the reality is that God can handle it, right? With you and your relationship with him, the pain, he already knows what's going on. So for you to keep it bundled up in secret how you feel is only hurting you. And it's not allowing God into those feelings. And that's what David did. He says, I pour out before him my complaint. Before him, I tell my trouble. And then he says this in verse 5. He says, I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. And David makes this connection between, as he pours out his heart in worship, the pains and the things that he's confused about, the things that he's angry about, the hurts and the pains, as he begins to pour them out, what he discovers is that God is his refuge. In those situations, in those issues, he finds God is his refuge. Now, refuge is kind of this fancy word for just basically his safe place, right? And David says again in a different place in Psalms 62, he says, trust in him at all times, you people. He says, pour out your hearts to him again, for God is our refuge. And again, David makes this connection between when you're going through hard times and things don't make sense, you pour out your hearts to him. Because God is our refuge. He's our safe place. I don't know if you've ever had a safe place, either now or growing up. For some people, it was, the closet. They would run into the closet when things weren't going their way. Or for some people, it's a person, right? When you're around a person, you feel safe, you feel secure. For my kids, right, the moment they feel any kind of, fear and insecurity, they come running to mommy and daddy. Usually sometime between the hours of 12 and 5 in the morning, right? And usually by the time I wake up, depending on what happened over the evening, I have 1 to 3 little bodies, kind of Tetris shaped into our bed, sleeping, because that's their safe place. They feel secure there. Something happened where they woke up in the middle of the night and, maybe forgot where they were, forgot what's going on, but they know when they go downstairs, they're safe when they're with mommy and daddy. Now, I can relate. I don't remember as a young person going into my parents' bed too often, but my parents kind of raised me on this diet of scary end times videos. All right, I don't know if your parents ever did this to you, but it's the only time I remember going to my parents' house is waking up from a dream about the rapture happening and the soldiers were coming to chop my head off because of the old image of the beast and distant thunder videos. And I blame you Skinners because they probably got them from your bookstore. I don't know, but as a result of who I am, because of the trauma I faced in those videos, right? But I would cry and be wailing, and just something natural, internal. My safe place was to go into my parents' bedroom. When we feel scared or in danger, we need a safe place to go. When we're alone, we need refuge. And God's promise is that He is that refuge for us. And we can access that as we're pouring out our hearts to Him in worship. That refuge, that safe place. And that's where we want to go here this morning. We want to tap into this lifestyle of God as our refuge and a place where we can pour out our hearts and worship to Him with whatever we're going through. And we no longer have to keep bottled and stuffed these feelings that begin to grow toxic inside of us and wear us out from the inside in. And I would love to be able to tell you that, it's these 3 things that you do, 1, 2, 3 points, and then your heart is poured out and you're good to go. You accomplish it for the day. But it doesn't work that way, right? This is abstract. It's different. It's weird. It's what you do today and maybe something else next week. But what we can do is we can kind of look at some general principles at how do we nurture the soil of being able to pour out our hearts in worship and living in this intimacy in refuge with God as a part of our lifestyle. So just a couple things we're going to look at to help us pour out our hearts. The first thing is being in this attitude, this state of constantly remembering God's faithfulness in the past. If you're taking notes, this would be a great thing to write down. We're remembering God's faithfulness in the past. Again, David says, "My tears have been my food day and night." I don't know if you ever found yourself in a situation like that where it just seems all you can do is cry, and even cry some more when there's tears are all gone. And David says, "My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me all day long, 'Where is your God?'" Right, as you're going through these issues and the people around you begin to question, man, if you're, into this God thing, then where's God now as you're going through this? Why would a good God let you suffer like this or allow these things to happen to you? Where's your God? David says this, "These things I remember." And again, he says, "I pour out my soul." How I used to go to the house of God under the protection of the Mighty One with shouts of joy and praise among the festive throng. He's remembering the things that he used to do and the different times when he encountered God. And if God was real then God still has to be real now as I'm going through these things. And he pours out his soul to God in worship to help him remember the things that God did in the past. And then it's like he almost makes this transition from speaking to, reflectively, that he begins to speak right to God. It turns his attention right back to God and to himself. He says, "Why, my soul, are you downcast?" He starts preaching to himself. "Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God." As he begins to pour out these things that he's going through, and he begins to remember, man, the God who is real on the mountaintop is the same God who's real in the valleys. So as a result of that, he preaches to himself, why, my soul, are you going to be downcast? Let's put our hope in God. And I don't understand God at times, right? This doesn't make any sense, God. Why is this happening? And we're going to dive into these feelings and pour out, hopefully, our hearts this morning in a way that maybe we've not been able to. But another person in the Bible that we can look to is someone who expresses this idea of pouring out his heart is Jeremiah. Jeremiah is another Old Testament character, a prophet. His nickname is actually the Weeping Prophet, right? So he's got some kind of resume that says if you deserve that kind of title, he's been through some rough things, right? And sometimes it would just be verse after verse in Jeremiah's life where he talks about the pains in the book of the Bible that you may or may not be able to guess, attributed to a lot of his stories, the book of Lamentations. I don't know if you see where we're going here. He's lamenting. But he says this, he says, I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I don't know, has life ever felt like that for you? I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Right? In the midst of those situations, in the midst of those seasons where depression is sinking in, and my mind just begins to wander and take me places that I don't like, he says, yet this in those times I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And again, Jeremiah begins to, same way, almost preach to himself to say, because of these things, I have hope. Because the Lord is great love. His compassion never fails. I call these to mind. He was talking about God, and now he's talking to God. As he begins to remember and adjust the things that God did in the past for him, it realigns his focus, and now he's in this conversation about God, to God. And sometimes we have to look back to remember what it is that he has brought us through. All right, I remember those times when I would read a verse or maybe hear a message, and it felt like it was almost an arrow straight from God, like piercing my heart. There didn't have to be anyone else in the room because that word, that message was just for me and what I needed to hear at that point of life. And it was like a love letter that God would bring all these people together, and he would cause the speaker to speak about and prepare this message for something that was just for me. Or there could have been a broken relationship that I went through in times with my parents, and it didn't seem like there were maybe any signs of life. And years went by where we didn't even have any kind of relationship. And they were just a few miles up the road. There was enough hurt and pain and pride to keep us occupied kind of in our own swamp. But great is your faithfulness. And I can remember. I remember times where I'd be watching a movie and God would use this storyline or use this particular the character in the story to bring me to a place where I'd be like ugly crying, right? There's different kinds of crying you have where you're just like a small tear forms, right? And then there's like the ugly crying where it's like snot coming out of your nose and you can't control yourself, right? I would be doing like the ugly crying from watching this movie because God used it in such a way to tap and to stir my heart. It felt like this message from him and who he wanted me to be and who he was calling me to be. And even now, today, I can look back to those moments and remember from my past, the God who was real then is still the same God who's real now in the valleys, in the depressions, in the hurts, in the pains. I remember God did create me for a purpose. Just like you, God created you on purpose for a purpose. And I remember getting involved with this crazy real estate guy talking about, the community and building a church and what that would look like. And we would start to get there early and help set up, and it was the same people week after week after week. And I remember God's stirring in my heart and what he called us to do and what we believe he was going to do. And then I remember that first Sunday where we had people who came for the first time here at the theater. It was the Carters. The Carters were like our first sign of hope, right? That there's hope. People might actually come, Steve, right? And then gradually, different seasons, and we have to rely on, God's going to be faithful. And then more other people would come at other times, and you can start to see this kind of ragamuffin group of people that God's bringing together to shake up Syracuse. And now here we are on the eve of what's probably going to be our craziest ministry night to date, right? A packed house of families who may or may not have any kind of relationship with Jesus or connection to people who care about them and their purpose. But tomorrow night, for the first time, or maybe for another time, there's going to be about 650 people who are going to have an invitation to come and be a part of what's going on at Forward Point and to be a part of our Christmas Eve service, and whose purpose they may experience and tap into for the first time. And we have to remember those things. We started off in this little itty-bitty thing week after week, doing the same setups with nobody new coming. But we remember God's faithfulness. And then the Carters came. And now we'll never be the same. Right? We have to remember the things that God has spoken to us. The things that he's spoken to me that have, they're stuck with me. We remember God's faithfulness. And I know tomorrow it's not going to be the ugly crying tomorrow, but there's going to be some emotion to see this room packed with people. Because it's a vision, it's a foreshadowing of what God could do through a group of people who are just faithful to follow in what they hear him calling them to do. And even though there's small beginnings, even though it may take years of plowing and sowing, it's just going to be a glimpse. And that's going to be a picture that I'm going to hold on to for when the times are tough and for when it's the dead of winter and people are out with the flu and we're, back down to the ragamuffin crew. We're going to know, we're going to believe that God has plans, that God is still doing something. I will call to mind, and it will fill me with hope. Great is your faithfulness. I remember coming back to Apple these last 3 years, and as I came back, after moving back from Indiana, they kind of started grooming me to be in a management type of position. Now, if you know anything about Apple, it's a great company, right? They have a lot of money. Management gets paid really well, right? So when I came back and they started preparing me for this, all I had were like dollar signs in my eyes. Like, I would love to be in a place where I'm just making mad money, right? It wasn't really what I was passionate about, right? Being in management. I love Apple. I love talking to people and products, but management, you hold the iPad and you got to make sure people go on their breaks and you do all this stuff it seems menial to me. But I prayed and I worked so hard to get it right. Okay, this is what I want. I'm going to set my family up. They're going to be financially secure. They're not going to need anything. And things just began to kind of fall apart. And I didn't get it. I didn't get the position, and then I started to evaluate what was really important to me. So I became a technician, and as a technician, they sent me to this all-expense-paid trip to California to learn. It was kind of one of those things on my bucket list to be able to visit Apple headquarters. And it became time to follow his calling, to be a part of Forward Point and help building this church and reaching the community. As a result of the position I was in, I was able to move into a part-time position because I could be more involved here. And when I realized, as I look back and I see those things, that I had no idea that the very thing that I wanted was the last thing that I needed. Right? The very thing that I was working so hard to get, the very thing that I consumed my energy. I put resources into making this resume. I spent time, with my managers, give me the right answers, the things that I'm going to need to get this position, so that we'll be secure. Granted, I'll have to work these crazy hours in retail. It's always changing, and it's just part of my life that will have to be adjusted. But I wanted it. And God in his faithfulness knew that the thing that I wanted was not the thing that I needed. And I didn't get it because of his faithfulness. And I'm here to be able to be a part of, the thing that there's probably nothing I'm more passionate about. I remember the faithfulness of God, to pour out your heart to God. Get real, be honest, don't hold back. Don't sugarcoat it. God can handle it. He's got big shoulders. But as you do, remember the faithfulness of God. Remember the things in the past that he's done as you cry out to him and let it turn into worship. The second thing I would encourage you to do is just trust in God's power for your future. Right? Most of our worries can probably be dumped in this bucket of just the future. What does the future hold? As we begin to trust God's power for our future, then we'll find ourselves at a place to be able to worship. Hear my prayer, Lord. Again, David, let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from you when I am in distress. And here's David again in one of those places where it feels like the world is against him. It feels like the picture and the plans that God has for him doesn't add up to the circumstances that he sees around in his life. And he's asking God, he's saying, God, do not hide your face from me when I'm in distress. Why does it feel like you're nowhere to be found? Why does it feel so empty? Turn your ear to me when I call. Answer me quickly. In my distress, I groan aloud and am reduced to skin and bones. You see this process of pouring out your heart and being real, it's ugly. It's the ugly kind of crying, right? It's I groan aloud and I'm reduced to skin and bones. I lie awake. I've become like a bird alone on a roof. All day long, my enemies taunt me. Those who rail against me use my name as a curse. But then these three words. All right, these three words that David says next to the linchpin, the three words that for you might change the course of the next situation you find yourself in, the next season that you find yourself in of sadness and depression and loneliness. He says, but you, Lord. All right, in the midst of the pouring out the heart and being real and laying out the gory details, but you, Lord. Sit enthroned forever. Your renown endures through all generations. He will respond to the prayer of the destitute. He will not despise their plea. And again, David comes full circle to this place where he adjusts, and as he's pouring out and saying, God, where are you? Why are you absent? But you, Lord. But you, Lord. Some of you are going to have a but you, God type of moments, right? You will roll out your list of complaints and grievances, and you're going to be honest, and it's going to be gut-wrenching, and you're going to tap into some things that maybe you've left buried, and it's going to hurt, and I don't understand. And at some point, you will push through all of that pain to the point of praise. Right? That's the key, is as you're pushing through all of this pain, it's going to turn to praise. As you pour out your hearts. I wish there was some other way, but you, God, will never leave me or forsake me. For those of you in the midst of some kind of financial stress, right, it's going to be, but for you, God, shall supply all of my needs according to your riches. Maybe you're afraid and you don't know what's going to happen. For you, it's, but you, God, have not given me a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And as you're pouring out your heart and the pain and the junk starts flowing out, your pain turns to praise. Always been faithful in the past. God has always been faithful in the past. He is good in the present. And he can be trusted in the future. I'm going to ask the Bruchelles to come up, and we're going to share a song with you. And when I think about my engagement to Chaz, it's been anything but a easy road. We've probably endured some of those experiences, those things that you wouldn't wish on anybody. But I remember after, she had gone through the death of her father and kind of turned into this whirlwind of emotions and feelings, and she lost her father in a way that just, it sends you into some pretty dark places. And then you can imagine having just been engaged for a period of weeks, maybe a month, where this happens. And for the longest time, everything was happy and we loved each other, and you throw in this bomb and all of a sudden you just start to not understand how to deal or cope or help each other, be there for each other. And I can remember being in the car and we were having this conversation and we were just confused when, where things were going to go. And I remember her taking off the ring and handing it to me in a way of we broke it off for a period. Because we were confused, we didn't know how this was going to affect us. We didn't know if we were going to be able to work through this together and make it through. And I had never proposed to anyone before. It's her. What's going on here? What's happening? It's painful, fearful. What's everybody going to think? How am I going to explain this to people? Am I losing the person who I've just decided I wanted to spend the rest of my life with? And it sent me into this time where I had to get real and honest with myself to realize, most of my life I've spent throwing my emotions pursuing girls. And somehow through all these different, broken relationships and bad motives, somehow God had found a way to keep me safe and to guard my heart and to put me in a place where I looked back and I said, man, the same God who was real in those situations. I don't understand. And the next, couple of days, week, were spent ugly crying in my bed, uncertain, not knowing. But the same God who walked with me when he called me and said, I have a plan and a purpose for you, walked with me when I didn't know it. I would pour my heart out to him in worship. And it almost felt weird to be able to get and bust through to that point where you start to praise. You can't help but just sing, and it's not like there's a band playing and it's happy-go-lucky praise, but you just start to sing and you start to truly worship God in a way that you can't unless it's been through the course of pain. So I asked the Rochelles to sing this song. It's a more popular song called Say Something. And it's about this broken relationship that we feel a lot of times, right? And for us this morning, it's this broken relationship with God. We may, kind of hide it under the covers and pretend like everything's okay, but if we were to pull back the curtains and expose the things that have been stuffed deep and buried, we'd realize that there's these things festering that we need to pour out here this morning. And these guys, when they were writing this song, they don't really they claim to have a huge spiritual background, but this is how they described it. They said, we were finally in the most honest place we've ever been with ourselves. And it felt like we dug deep. Right, this morning my prayer for us would be is that we would get to a place where we could say we're in the most honest place that we've ever been in with ourselves. They go on to say it was the first time writing felt like a religious experience for us. Right, there's something that began to happen inside their soul as they dug deep and they got real with the feelings and the things that were going on inside of them. It became this religious experience. And they say it was so painful, but it was so beautiful. It was very powerful and moving for us to write, but we never thought it would take off like this, because it took off in a way as people heard their words. It helped them to be able to tap into their own pain. And this morning, they're going to share the words with you this morning.
stumble and fall. I'm still learning to love, just starting to crawl. Save something, I'm giving up on you. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to you. Anywhere I would have followed you. Say something, I'm giving up on you. And I will swallow my pride. You're the one that I love, and I'm saying goodbye. Say something, I'm giving up on you. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to you. Anywhere I would have followed you. Say something, I'm giving up on you. Say something, I'm giving up on you.
With me this morning, just bow your heads and close your eyes. And it could be this morning that you are on the top of the mountain and in a great place. And for you this morning, it's easy to pour out your heart. Then I would encourage you just to begin to pray for the people around you who may be in the deep, deep valleys. And if you're here this morning and that's you, you're in the deep, deep valley. Right? Some kind of issue, either presently or from the past, things that have been weighing you down, festering, turning toxic inside of you. This morning, you're feeling a stir of some things that you need to pour out and worship to God this morning. To get real, to get honest, to get them out. And these words that were sung explain this relationship where we feel, we would have followed you anywhere, God, but the pain, the hurt, it doesn't make sense. It's broken. Jesus tells the story of the son who spends his life away and comes to his senses and decides to go back to his father, and just even as a servant, he'd go back because he knows that his father treats his servants with dignity. And as he's going back to the Father, Jesus describes the heart of the Father in this way by saying, when he was still a long way off, his Father saw him. Right? The Father was in the state of constantly looking, constantly waiting for the Son to come back. And even while the Son was still a long way off, his Father saw him. His heart pounding, he ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech, "Father, I've sinned against God. I don't deserve," but the father wasn't listening. He was calling to the servants, "Quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. We're going to party. My son is here, given up for dead and now alive, given up for lost and now found." And they began to have a wonderful time. So this morning, the heart of the Father here this morning is to to hear your heart poured out to him, the good, the bad, the ugly. And what I'm going to have these guys do is sing a part of this that's from the heart of the Father. And as they do what I would love for you just to even now begin to think about these specific things that you need to pour out. And if this morning there's things that you know that you want to pour out this morning in worship to God, for you, I would encourage us to respond in some way. Maybe it's a putting your hands on your heart. Maybe it's a standing up. Maybe it's a raising of your hands. Maybe it's a getting down on your knees. But as you begin to hear and connect with the Father's heart for you in the midst of where you're at, where the Father's not even listening, he's just getting things ready for the party because you once were lost, but now you're found. Would you pour out your heart for worship this morning to God? Let's hear from the Father's heart.
And I have been watching you, child, still learning to love, starting to crawl. And I am waiting here now. Will you open your heart? I've been here all along. You say I'm not giving up on you. You say I'm still running after you. Everywhere I have been there with you. Child, I will never give up on you. You say I'm not giving up on you. You say I'm still running after you. Everywhere I have been there with you. Child, I will never give up on you. Child, I have given my heart to you. Child, I will never my heart to you. Child, I will never give up on you.
God, here you find us waist deep in the midst of all of our pourings out to you in worship. God, help us to build an altar around this moment where we would be able to look back and remember to that time where we encountered a God who is waist deep with us, embracing us, preparing the party for us as we've come back to him. So God, we pray that you would take all of these hurts, these pains, and in the way that only you can, miraculously, you would begin to turn them and heal them and form them into stories of beauty and of rescue, of healing, so that we might be a people that are not hindered or held back or weighed down by anything, but we're freed in your spirit to raise our hands, to get on our knees, to give our gifts, but most importantly, we're free to be able to pour out our hearts to a God who's invested in the details of our lives. so there'll be nothing holding us back. And we'd be able to look back to this moment, and as a result, when they come again, the pains in the future, we will be able to remember who you've been in the past and that you're good in the present and you can be trusted with the future. We're going to push through the pain to the praise of who you are and who you've been to us. We love you and we thank you so much for you choosing to be that for us, for not just being aloof or watching, but to be waist deep in our with us holiness. Wanting this kind of relationship with us. We love you. This morning as you go, if there's certain things that maybe you're going on that you just would love specific prayer for, just to chat about, I know Steve will be up here and I'll be up here, and we'd love to be a part of that story along with you. Otherwise, as you go, just encourage one another, grab some snacks, love on each other, and be prepared for some awesome things to begin to happen tonight and into tomorrow for Polar Express. Okay, hope to see you guys all there. Love you. Have a great week.